Chad, let's start with Faith Wins. What's going on? I understand there was this conference call the other day with pastors. Reince was on the call. Reince, I'll ask you in a moment about that. But Chad, tell me a little bit about the mobilization effort right now as we see it in the country.
Yeah, just from my perspective, David, and glad to be here and glad to be here with a friend and mentor like Reince and you. And I appreciate all you're doing to keep news out there. But, you know, Reince gets a lot of credit for Faith Wins too. Had it not been for GOP Faith and going to 43 states and speaking to some 80-something thousand pastors and discovering that they want to know what's going on, they want to engage, they just need the tools and resources. So Reince was good enough to do a conference call last week. We had 825 pastors who registered. Most of them stayed on the phone the whole time, and they were from all 50 states. So we're going to continue what we did with GOP Faith, but we have more resources, more manpower. I've got more bivocational pastors on the ground, and we're going to measure voter registration in the churches like it's never been done before, David.
Hey, Reince, let me ask you how you got involved with this. I mean, I know the relationship between you and Chad, and it goes back to the RNC, but you seem to bring a couple of different key elements here. The RNC, obviously that experience, being inside the White House, that experience. Tell me a little bit about what you're hoping to add to this effort that Faith Wins is undertaking.
Well, thank you, David, for having me. First of all, I just wanted to, tip my hat to Chad for continuing this passion that he has in engaging pastors and people of faith to stay involved in the political process, educating pastors that they have, and priests and rabbis and everyone else of people of faith, that there is a responsibility to talking about the issues that matter to our government, to our great country that we all love. And so part of what I love about Chad is that he's never lost that passion to keep engaging people of faith, engaging the leadership of people of faith, and asking our leaders of faith to do something pretty basic. Get your congregations, get your people registered to vote. And that if you do that, and if you're willing to at least talk about issues of faith that are happening in Washington, D.C. or your state capital, that in the end is going to bring, I think, the issues of the people of faith more to the forefront by engaging our pastors and getting them registered. Now, you may think, well, this doesn't sound very earth-shattering, but in fact it is. That engaging pastors and engaging people that go to church in the political process, not telling them who to vote for, not violating any laws, but just telling them that it's important to get out and vote and participate, and perhaps even having a Sunday or a Saturday or whatever the day may be of registering those people to vote is something that I have always believed in, that we have a role to play. And Chad is taking it even further. The party, I'm sure, obviously is still doing this, but any activity we can have, what Chad's doing here to continue that effort is a phenomenal thing, and I'm excited about it.
Reince, from an analytics standpoint, look, in 2016, the president won with 81% of the evangelical vote. How crucial is it this time around? I mean, I know a lot of folks believe he's got to be at that number or probably even north of that number to win because of the anti-vitriol against this president on the left.
Well, if you look at what the president has accomplished when it comes to the issues that are most important to people of faith, when you look at the conservative judges on the Supreme Court, I mean, that alone is enough to excite, I think, people of faith. You look at circuit court judges and what the president has done, and you look at the rest of the federal bench. I think he has now appointed more judges to the federal bench than both Barack Obama and George Bush combined in the same period of time, I think by 3. So it's remarkable. That's number one. That's just one thing, let alone the Johnson Amendment, let alone the fact you moved the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, something that Republicans and Democrats had promised time and time again. But it took a business guy from New York to do these things that you and I and Chad have been talking about for 20 years. So that's what's important. I mean, there's more to it than that, but I think the fact that he's led by example is something that you can just point to and say, well, you can say all you want to say about Donald Trump, But when it comes to actually accomplishing the things that we care about, people of faith, hey, the proof's in the pudding.
Amen.
Hey, Chad, I'm curious about anecdotally what you're seeing in terms of enthusiasm on the ground, if you will, to use a term. I mean, Reince just laid out a lot of the things that this president has done, but do you see it translating at this point, or what's your spidey sense, your evangelical spidey sense telling you, if that's even a term, by the way?
It is a good term. We just watched all those the other night with the kids. Yeah. Oh my goodness, it is wide open, David. And I just want to mention too, in that vein, this is the first time Reince and I have double teamed this. I think we could go across the country. You would not believe the response. I don't know one pastor in my world who's upset about anything the president's done. In fact, they love him more. They see the vitriol, they see the hatred and the anger, the complete negative tone. But let me give Reince some credit on something, because he had the foresight. I said, Reince, to pastors, I can't push a party or a candidate, but if they vote biblical values, our side's going to win. And I think I wrote to him in Reince, July 2013, if we ever hit 80%, the left can't win dog catcher to president. And lo and behold, Donald Trump sets a record. And I don't know that me and Reince, we didn't ask for any of the credit. We don't deserve all the credit, but at least we had a purposeful plan to make sure churches maximize their registration, that they were informed and they were voting biblically in everything they did. Jesus isn't running. I tell pastors that all the time. Therefore, it's just like Reince just said, it's our responsibility to let people know, which one weighs closest and weighs on our side of the issues, of the biblically induced issues that matter to us. That's what we tell them. Make sure you're voting biblical values.
Part of this, David, is also to challenge our pastors, that they can't just be interested in politics as a sort of a hobby on the side that they never actually bring forward to church on Sunday. I'm saying in a legal way. I'm not advocating breaking the law. And the one thing I used to say quite a bit, not to be repetitive, is that our churches cannot be, vanilla ice cream and cotton candy on Sunday morning. We have to challenge our congregations and challenge them to, at the very least, participate in the process. And I, as a party leader, I used to tell pastors all the time, because they'd be upset with me or think that maybe we were too watered down, or I wasn't being strong enough on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd or whatever. You know how it goes.
Right.
I used to tell the pastors, don't hold me to a higher standard than you're willing to hold yourself on Sunday morning. Don't hold the party leader to a higher biblical standard than your own. And most of the time, a lot of these pastors would never talk about these issues on Sunday, but they'd be riled up at the party if they didn't do X, Y, or Z. So we challenge them. And what Chad's doing with Faith Wins is continuing that challenge all over the country.
Hey,
Dave, I will mention this to you, and he just said something to remind of this, to tell you how excited pastors are. So when I left the RNC, I had about just under 10,000 pastors' names, emails, cell phones in my cell phone. We've had almost 4,430 something pastors that have not been on my list. I wasn't in contact with. I either spoke directly to in meetings. This is January 4th to today. And up till mid-March, I saw a lot of those in person. We've done anywhere from 3 to 8 Zoom calls by state, congressional district, just specific areas. So 4,430 something that weren't on my list previously that I have connected with since January 4th this year. That tells you a lot about how animated they are to get involved this year.
Yeah, that's obviously really impressive, Chad. Hey, and Reince, I'm wondering, Chad mentioned something earlier. It's really been an underreported story about your involvement, or at least spearheading this faith effort from the RNC back in the day, if you will, and now here you are again. And talk to me about that in terms of it being personal for you, because look, you're a busy guy. I mean, you could put your name and weight behind a lot of different efforts, a lot of different things, and I'm sure you have your certain issues and pet projects, if you will, that you do. But why this one? Why is this crucial for you from a personal standpoint? I know you're a believer, but it's not like you're going down the aisle with a tambourine and you're going all Pentecostal here. I mean, you have a strong faith, though, and I'm curious about that.
Faith is the foundation for everything in my life and why I did what I did, as far as everything from being a county chairman of the local board to college Republican president to every crazy job in the party. I everything from sign coordinator to a guy that making sure that we've got enough pizzas at the phone bank. But just for the party platform, that's great, but that's not the motivation. The motivation is faith in God, the faith in God and what it transpires and what it feeds into in our country. And why, when I became chairman of the RNC, it was really important to continue an effort of engaging pastors and challenging them to not just turn their church into a political free zone, but that if we are going to be salt and light in everything that we do, it has to transpire and it has to transform into Sunday morning, and it has to be that pastors are the tip of the spear. It can't be that party leaders are the tip of the spear. Pastors have to do it. And explaining that to pastors has always been a passion of mine, and why I'm excited for two things. One, the effort that we began at the RNC is continuing at the RNC. So they're still doing a lot of work that we're talking about. But also Chad, who built something special at the RNC, is also continuing that through Faith Wins and throughout the country. So I support the effort that Chad is continuing to bring to the forefront of churches and people of faith across America.
Let me just ask you a final question for both of you, and then we're done. Reince, just on kind of, I don't want to call it news of the day, a little bit about how you think the media has been treating this president and the coronavirus and everything that's been going on. It just seems like these briefings, now it looks like these briefings are going to stop. I'm just kind of curious about what you think the media is doing. I mean, they seem to have it in for this president since day one.
Well, look, David, the battle lines have been drawn. Republicans and Democrats agree that the president is going to be judged based on how this response to the coronavirus is going. And so the press and the Democrats have only one thing on their mind, which is to crush President Trump every day on his response to the coronavirus, whether it's fair, unfair, pure lunacy, or just made up. But they know that they have to try to destroy the president based on his response. The president is dealing with something that's never been dealt with in modern history, at least since 1950, right? I mean, so we are involved in something politically we've never been involved with. The president's doing everything that he can. I think he's doing a remarkably good job. And there's not any other interpretation is revisionist history. It's trying to go back to, January, December, if only this, if only that. Well, guess what? No one thought that we'd be where we are today in February. And so I think this is what it's coming down to. The president's done a good job, but who knows what tomorrow brings, right? We don't know. It is an unprecedented time, unprecedented politics. And I think the Trump campaign, the RNC, and the president are doing absolutely everything they possibly can do every day to be successful in November.
And Chad, along those lines, how important, you hear all of the media bashing Trump every single day. How does that resonate in pastor land, if you will, out there with the troops?
Well, they're fired up, especially on the religious liberty issues, David. They're concerned. They see the progressive governors and mayors that are overreaching, but they also know, and we're reminding them, that if they're anywhere near what the Barna Group says, 80 couple million people sitting in churches on a typical Sunday and still only 30 million voting, somewhere between 40 and 50 million people that profess Jesus and sit in church, don't bother to exercise their amendment rights, much less their voting rights. They know they have the solution. And what we want to do with Faith Wins, our goal is pretty simple. We want to provide tools and resources and have the most robust, most accurately measured evangelical church voter registration drive in all of political history. And I got to, again, tip the hat to Reince. The political people may not have ever done this. It was his faith that we sat down in December of 2012 and said, how do we reach the most reliable voting bloc in all political history and run up the score in an area where it should be voting strongly for conservatives? And that's what Faith Wins is committed to doing.
And I would think that, as I just follow up to my last question, which is typically never my last question, but now it really is, which Reince, it's just amazing that this president of all presidents has probably delivered more for evangelicals and Christians than I don't know, I guess what, any president in history, at least modern history for sure.
God uses people in different ways for whatever the mysteries of time to accomplish his will.
Yeah.
And, what you just said is exactly true. I remember the second debate. We had just gotten through a crazy weekend. We had the second debate. That was the one in St. Louis. And that was when the president articulated partial birth abortion. And who would have thought it would have been Donald Trump as a modern day presidential candidate was going to forcibly articulate the issue of partial birth abortion on behalf of the Republican Party in a way that no modern Republican president did, but it was him. So you're right. I mean, no one would have thought that it would have been Donald Trump. Of the 16 candidates we had up there, that it would actually be Trump that would be signing the gutting of the Johnson Amendment in the Rose Garden, with Stephen Curtis Chapman doing the warm-up act before that ceremony. And who would have thought it was Donald Trump that was going to finally put the embassy in Jerusalem? Yeah. These are big things. So I think action speaks louder than words, and the actions from the president have been great.
Reince Priebus, Chad Connelly, guys, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time. Good luck with Faith Wins.
You bet. Thank you,
God
David.
bless.